Now back to that other Beltway squabbling. Congress is back to debate taxes and small business relief, and tomorrow's primary contest may offer us some information about this year's emerging political themes, or it may upend them altogether. There are closely watched races in Delaware, New York, and New Hampshire, and joining me to take a look at the landscape and the ongoing battle between Barack Obama and House Republican John Boehner are Chief Political Consultant Marc Ambinder and Senior Political Producer Jill Jackson. Jill, I want to start with you. So on last Friday at his news conference, the president said Republicans are holding the middle class hostage. They don't want to pass tax relief for the middle class, only for everyone, including those who make over $250,000. Then John Boehner was on Face the Nation and said, well, I might be up for embracing a smaller tax cut. What's going on?
Well, I think some Republicans think Boehner may have gotten a bit ahead of himself. I think under the tough questioning of Mr. Schieffer, that Boehner, said, okay, well, at the end of the day, I'm not going to vote to raise anyone's taxes. But at the same time, now, today, I'm hearing from Eric Cantor's office and also Boehner's aides that really they're first going to fight for an up or down vote on extending all of the Bush tax cuts. And, that's their first fight. And I see them sort of giving a few loopholes in there that would allow Boehner to maybe backtrack on what he said yesterday.
Right, so he gets it both ways.
Exactly. Yep, that we were looking for an open debate, and you didn't give us that, and so therefore I can't. In the end, our hands are tied.
Right. Mm-hmm. Marc, President Obama is going to take on Boehner again today in his remarks. So now we have what feels like a tit-for-tat back and forth of the pace we saw in the last presidential year. It's President Obama versus John Boehner. What's in it? What's the White House's goal here?
Well, John Boehner is very clearly outmatched by President Obama, and I don't think Republicans have any illusions otherwise. And so I think that's one reason why the White House finds that John Boehner, who potentially could become the next speaker, is a useful foil, someone who it will yield significant dividends to the White House if they're able to introduce him to the American people as someone who bumbles, who is immune to reason or has extreme points of view. So I think that's one reason why the White House is taking him on. I think Boehner's blunder, which it clearly was, is one of those blunders that won't affect the course too much of what actually happens, because it's not clear that there are enough votes, even with Democrats controlling the House now in a lame duck session, to not extend all of the tax cuts. And what Boehner may have simply done, though, is shifted the terrain of a compromise a little bit away from extending all of the tax cuts from 1 year to perhaps just extending the tax cuts for those making less than $250,000. But I still don't think the votes are there. So I think this is more of a referendum, or this will turn into more of a referendum on the way Boehner will lead his House Republicans, rather than affect the tax debate all that much.
I think that Pelosi, though, thinks that it's an opportunity to put the Republicans on the record for voting for or voting against extending all of the tax. For voting for the tax cut extension.
Right. Well, as Democrats look at this in both the Senate and the House, I mean, do they have to shift their playbook? They were planning to do what in this brief period between the recess and when they go back to campaigning? What are they thinking about now in terms of trying to take advantage of this moment, or at least use this as a, as they say, messaging moment to set the debate for the campaigns?
Well, talking to Democrats last week, they really said, we're not sure that we can do tax cuts before the election. They would like to put Republicans on the record, but they weren't exactly sure if they could get it done. It was looking more likely in the Senate, but not in the House. Now, aides are telling me that they're going to try and bring it up to the House floor this month, and they want to have this debate. They want to bring it out there. So Boehner's comments really shifted the likelihood that something will be voted on related to the tax cuts before the elections.
So we have both Democrats saying they want this fight and the Republicans saying we want this fight. So we'll see how that turns out. Now, Marc, I want to switch to the primaries tomorrow. And let's talk first about Delaware. What's happening there, and what does it mean?
Well, I made a boneheaded malapropism earlier, but Republicans may be making a boneheaded move in Delaware. Latest polls out of Delaware suggests that Christine O'Donnell, who is an insurgent Tea Party-backed candidate, is poised to defeat Mike Castle, who was pushed to run by Washington Republicans, the dreaded Washington Republicans, the National Republican Senatorial Committee, and had been leading the race until recently. Tea Party Express comes in, Sarah Palin comes in, gives an endorsement to Christine O'Donnell. But O'Donnell, unlike many of the insurgent candidates who have won, but like some others, including Sharon Angle, has well, she's not necessarily yet ready for prime time, much less early prime. She is a candidate who is quite frankly prone to gaffes. There are questions about her ethics, about whether she misstated her resume, her education resume, and others, and she's been on the defensive constantly. But 30,000 people are going to vote in Delaware, which gives her a chance to win. If she wins, there's a significant chance, that Democrats will once again view that state as competitive for them. It's Vice President Biden's seat. Remember, he vacated it. Chris Coons is the Democratic candidate. If Christine O'Donnell wins tomorrow night, Democrats will probably have a better than even chance of keeping that seat.
So, Jill, we had a situation here in which prognosticators were saying that Republicans might take control of the Senate by getting a net 10 seats, whatever control means in what the Senate will look like. But anyway, they might get their 10 seats. Now, what happens if Mike Castle loses?
If Mike Castle loses, as Marc said, there's a great chance that a Democrat could actually take that seat, and it just makes Democrats' chances. Mike Castle, was supposed to be the nominee. He's the candidate Republicans wanted and still want today, and they're fighting very hard. Rather than in Alaska, they were sort of surprised by Joe Miller.
Fighting back.
Exactly,
Right.
But now they're fighting back. However, I think that this really could be an opportunity for the Democrats to keep that seat if O'Donnell indeed does win.
And what judgments will we make about the Tea Party? Will we be able to say, Marc, that the Tea Party has, in Nevada, Harry Reid was supposed to be a goner. Now Sharon Angle's put that seat in play. This is a situation in which it was a likely Republican pickup. Now it might be again in play. The Tea Party, the notion that the Tea Party is actually a big problem for the Republicans will presumably grow if Castle loses.
It could be a wash, because in House races, I see the Tea Party energy being fairly significant in generating enthusiasm for Republicans across the country. But it's really hard to make the argument that in Senate races, you look at a state like Kentucky, where Republicans are just going to have to spend more money to keep a seat that they probably would have kept anyway, because of a more competitive race brought on by a candidate who is farther from the center in Rand Paul, and Sharon Angle is just a flawed candidate. There was, right now there's a question of who's running her campaign, which is not a question you want to ask when you're 2 months away from the election. So I think, the Tea Party could very well, depending on what happens in November, prevent Republicans from taking over the Senate and help them take over the House. Does that mean that they are a force for good or a force for bad in terms of conservative politics? I'm not sure.
Do you share that view, Jill?
Absolutely. I think that they're going to drive turnout, and that is really going to help.
There's no question.
That's going to help Republicans in the House.
Let's go. Final race before we wrap up here, Marc, is in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
What's going to happen there? It's a little more different.
A little more different there, because the insurgent candidate is a well-established politician. He's well known throughout the state. Ovid LaMontagne, his wonderful name, but New Hampshire Republicans generally know who the guy is. And he's been endorsed by many of the same outside endorsers who are endorsing Christine O'Donnell, but much more credible candidate. But the race also, the Republican establishment candidate, you have to add all these adjectives before these primaries now. It twists up your tongue. Kelly Ayotte, the Attorney General, could win, and although LaMontagne, I should say, has the momentum. He was endorsed by the New Hampshire Union Leader, which is the major newspaper. They're sending directly a message to the Republicans in Washington. We want someone like LaMontagne who's going to come in and shake things up, and not someone who's going to, hew to the status quo, whatever that is. The only downside to the Republicans in this particular race is that the primary was nasty enough that it potentially gives the Democrat Paul Hodes an opening. But I still think that regardless of whether LaMontagne or Ayotte wins, this is still a Republican seat to hold on to. Again, he's a different candidate, LaMontagne, this insurgent, than Christine O'Donnell. They share some of the same views, but he's just a much more credible, well-known candidate who is roughly within the parameters of what you can consider normal New Hampshire for Republicans.
And the wave in New Hampshire, which was going towards the Democrats, is now shifting back towards the Republicans.
Shifting back, although I would say most of that is because the Democrats are simply not turning out. I mean, you don't, and you're seeing that across the country. It's not so much there's a huge wave towards Republicans. It's simply, if you look at politics as a football stadium, it's the other side is cheering very loudly, and one side is very, very quiet.
Quickly, Jill, at the end. So Sarah Palin, to just keep track of her because we must, she backed Ayotte and then also Christine O'Donnell.
Yes.
So she may come out, well, I guess we'll see. But will we be able to say anything about Sarah Palin after this is all over?
Well, I think that we will be able to say that Sarah Palin maybe gives a little bit of help, but in states like Delaware and New Hampshire, Sarah Palin may not play as well as she does in other states, like Nevada.
It's a very good point. We will be talking about Sarah Palin, which is, for her, a victory in and of itself.
That's right.
The biggest thing is the Tea Party Express and the help that they are giving Christine O'Donnell.
And quickly, what kind of help is that? Is it
Financial.
phones, money?
They're doing phone banks, they're airing advertisements, they're doing mailings. They're very involved in the O'Donnell race, as they were with Miller in Alaska.
Okay, excellent. Marc Ambinder, Jill Jackson, thanks so much. Don't forget to watch Jill on Unplug this Friday for hot ads of the week, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the merely curious that are saturating the airwaves in this year's midterm campaigns.